On May 7th, 1915, RMS Lusitania, bound for the city of Liverpool from New York City, was torpedoed and sunk by German U-boat.
It sank in just 18 minutes, dragging nearly 1,200 souls into the deep. For over a century, the RMS Lusitania has rested silently off the coast of Ireland, shrouded in secrecy and suspicion. Now, for the first time, an advanced underwater drone has ventured inside her shattered hull. What it recorded is haunting. Rooms frozen mid-chaos, evidence of mysterious explosions, and artifacts that whisper of lives cut short. Was this simply a wartime tragedy? Or is there more the world was never meant to see? Into the broken grave. The sea off the coast of Ireland has always carried whispers of the RMS Lusitania, but nothing compares to what modern technology has revealed. When the underwater drone first descended toward the wreck, the anticipation among the operators was almost unbearable.
Is nowhere near as deep as, say, where the Titanic went down. Titanic is roughly 2.5 miles underwater, while Lusitania is only 300 feet or so.
The Lusitania lies just 300 feet below the surface, a depth shallow enough to tempt divers over the decades, yet deep enough that most explorations remained partial, fragmented. This time, with a nimble drone capable of maneuvering into the ship's fractured hull, the descent promised to be unlike anything attempted before. As the drone's lights pierced the gloom, the Lusitania's tilted frame came into view. She rests on her starboard side, broken, twisted, and slowly disappearing into the seabed. Her once proud hull now resembles a vast skeletal carcass, draped in rust and colonized by sea life. To the untrained eye, she looks like nothing more than a heap of collapsed metal. But as the drone edged closer, subtle outlines emerged. The ribs of staircases, the arcs of collapsed decks, and the faint echo of grandeur long since lost. Through a huge opening in the hull, torn in chaos-induced madness on May 7, 1915, the entry was made. Survivors had spoken of a torpedo strike, shadowing an even more thunderous second blast. And here, into the twisted steel, no trace of that day was etched by every angle. The drone slipped past those jagged edges with extreme care so that it would not snag the tether and entered what once had been a dining area. The camera showed it to be a cavernous chamber filled with junk and rubbish. Fine china and glass lay scattered over the silt as if a great hand had swept through the room. Chairs lay overturned, most of their frames warped but still recognizable. A moment of destruction frozen for over a century, without human hands having touched it at all. The wreck got stranger the farther inside. In the somewhat strained glow of the drone, the minutiae emerged with horrific clarity. Personal belongings hastily abandoned, clothes hanging in the sediment, half-buried children's toys. One operator gasped when the camera lingered on a leather shoe resting upright, as if its owner had just stepped out of it moments before. Time, darkness, and saltwater had preserved these fragments of lives cut short. Each object had its own silent tale. Initially, the staircases looked stunning, arteries that carried passengers inside the vessel between the decks. They now resemble something of a collapsed spine. The bits of railing, remaining iron-scarped toward the decorative form, steeled out at odd angles. The drone hums softly from its thrusts while hovering as if unwilling to disturb the silence. For a moment, it was less like a machine probing through a wreck than a guest stepping inside a mausoleum. What startled the team most was the preservation of certain spaces. Although the wood had long ago rotted away, outlines of staterooms and hallways have remained clearly visible. In one stateroom, a piece of bed frame leaned against the wall, the brass fittings still faintly glimmering in the drone's lights. In other places, an apparently eyeless part of paneling, once polished and gleaming, now appears muted and covered with fine marine growth. But Under the ruin is enough to dream of how it might have looked to passengers boarding in New York, knowing nothing that their journey would be their last. Inside Lusitania, silence was not the absence of sound. It was an unbearable weight. Every corridor, every fallen beam was pregnant with the memory of 1,198 souls lost. In contrast to the Titanic, whose wreck lies a world away, deep within the ocean and often wrapped in a veil of mystique, the Lusitania felt more rawly political, a wound than a legend, as her calamity happened close to the shore. The drone's cameras witnessed this. The dilapidated shell of a former liner turned into a casualty of war. As the drone slid out of the dining room and deep into an ever-narrowing corridor, the operators noted an unsettling sight: hull sections that appeared to have been ripped inward rather than outward, suggesting forces of destruction greater than just a single torpedo. These weren't random patterns of deterioration. They looked calculated, violent, sudden. The first footage was haunting enough, but here, inside the Lusitania, the evidence hinted at mysteries still looking for answers. Yet the deeper the drone pushed inside, the more disturbing the evidence became. Signs of damage that no torpedo alone could explain. Evidence of a second blast. From the moment the Lusitania went down on May 7, 1915, survivors spoke of not one, but two explosions. The German U-boat U-20 had fired a single torpedo, striking the starboard side near the bridge. Passengers recalled a sharp, violent jolt that sent shockwaves through the vessel. But what followed seconds later was even more devastating. A second, deeper roar that ripped through the ship and sealed her fate. In just 18 minutes, the pride of Cunard was gone. The controversy over that second blast has raged for more than a century. And now, with the drone's chilling footage, new pieces of the puzzle have come to light. As the drone penetrated further inside the wreck, the cameras illuminated patches of the hull, one of which bore strange scars. Not toward the outside like the buckling one would imagine coming from an external strike. Many areas have actually steel plates bent inwards, like a holster folded over paper under immense force. Along corridors, some beams and bulkheads have fallen, mostly uncharacteristically relative to that of a single torpedo impact. The pictures were confirmation for experts reviewing the footage's long-held beliefs. There was something blowing up within the Lusitania. Historians have debated forever where that second explosion came from. Some said it was just coal dust igniting from the torpedo's hit. Others pointed to the boiler rooms, where ruptured machinery might have initiated a catastrophic chain reaction. But perhaps the most provocative theory is that the Lusitania, although officially a passenger liner, secretly carried munitions for Britain's war effort. If true, then the second explosion might not have been an accident at all. It could have been the detonation of unstable cargo hidden in her holds. The drone footage has reinforced the theory. The operators had observed that bulkheads and structural supports had collapsed in the lower parts of the wreck, all clustered in areas that one would envision had been meant for cargo storage. Some footage showed strange debris fields, metal shards, and unidentified remnants which were fused in place, trapped in the silt. None have dared disturb or recover them. Instead, the formations appeared far less to be decay of luxury goods and much more the aftermath of an explosion from within the ship's hull. This raises horrendous questions. At the time of the sinking, Germany warned that any ship flying the British flag risked attack, especially if it were carrying contraband materials relating to the war. Britain denied munitions were on the Lusitania, affirming it to be a passenger-carrying vessel. Yet, for decades, the whispers would continue acknowledging the potential of an incomplete cargo manifest. Official records could only mention foodstuffs, butter, cheese, and furs. But what of the missing tonnage? Could it cover something as suspicious as cases of rifle cartridges, shells, or explosives. The descendants of those who died suffer painful implications. There is a possibility that the Lusitania was carrying contraband war cargo, in which case civilians were sacrificed as shields. The drone footage from inside those collapsed steel plates and fractured interior spaces isn't just archaeological testimony. It's an echoing reminder that perhaps more than 1,100 lives may have been gambled at a political game within it. Yet this does not find unanimous support among experts. Some maintain that the imaging might be caused by progressive collapse, aggravated by saltwater leaching and biological decomposition over decades. For over a century, the Lusitania had been subjected to currents and storms, and some structural failures could simulate the appearance of internal blasts. The unsettling symmetry of certain buckles keeps the ball rolling. The drone's recordings, however, do not offer absolute proof, but they sharpen the questions that history prefers to leave silent. Without a doubt, the second explosion brought terror. That was what survivor accounts said of passengers thrown against bulkheads and staircases collapsing, and the decks heaved beneath their feet. A disaster may have begun with a torpedo, but the second one created just that panic that shattered so many lives. Families running to the lifeboats could not get them launched as the ship listed sharply to starboard. Crew members lost count, less than 20 minutes after the Lusitania went down. This is what drowning one's sorrow has brought back to life. Watching steel twisted inward, preserved after 110 years, feels like staring into the detonation point. It inspires the question, was Lusitania's destruction the work of a single torpedo, or were there those secrets the passengers never knew about? If the Lusitania was carrying more than passengers, what exactly was hidden in her holds? The drone may have given us our first real clues. Cargo of secrets. From the moment the Lusitania slipped beneath the waves, her cargo became one of the most contested mysteries of the First World War.
The Lusitania sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic 100 years ago today. The luxury liner was hit by a torpedo from a German U-boat, killing nearly 1,200 people.
Official British documents listed her contents as butter, cheese, furs, and other ordinary goods, the kind of trade one would expect between New York and Liverpool. But the numbers never quite added up. The ship was carrying nearly 2,000 people and thousands of tons of freight. Yet, the manifests seemed suspiciously incomplete. For decades, survivors, researchers, and even governments have wondered, was the Lusitania secretly transporting weapons of war beneath the feet of unsuspecting passengers? The drone's cameras ventured into areas that had remained undisturbed for more than a century. Her cavernous cargo holds, now collapsed in parts but still recognizable. What they recorded was more than rust and sea growth. Resting quietly in the silt were sealed crates, their edges softened by time, but their shapes unmistakable. The crates were stacked in patterns too deliberate to be random debris, suggesting they had been loaded with care and precision. For the operators watching from the surface, it was a chilling discovery. Were these the very boxes that caused the second explosion, as survivors had described? Historians have long argued over this possibility. Some point to American Munitions Company records that hint at shipments of rifle cartridges and artillery shells destined for Britain. At the time, Britain was desperate for supplies, and passenger liners offered speed and cover. To the public, the Lusitania was a glamorous transatlantic vessel. To the Admiralty, she may have been a convenient smuggler of war cargo. If that was the case, then every man, woman, and child aboard was unknowingly part of a dangerous gamble. The drone's footage cannot reveal the contents of the crates. Disturbing them would risk collapsing the fragile wreck or even triggering chemical reactions in whatever remains inside. But their very presence is enough to raise new suspicions. Why would a passenger liner carry tightly sealed boxes hidden deep within its lower decks? Why did the official cargo list omit any mention of them? And most importantly, could they explain the violent second detonation that tore through the ship after the torpedo strike? The implications extend far beyond archaeology. If Britain knowingly allowed contraband munitions aboard a civilian vessel, it would mean the passengers were used as human shields. Germany, in fact, had issued warnings in American newspapers that any ship flying the British flag was fair game for attack, especially if it carried war material. Few passengers took the warning seriously, believing the Lusitania was too fast and too prestigious to be in danger. They boarded with confidence, unaware that beneath their cabins, something dangerous might have been hidden. There hasn't been much to silence speculation in the past years by the governments. Some of the records that exist remain sealed, while others have been destroyed or waxed over with black ink. Those who sought answers have usually run into roadblocks put up by red tape and bureaucracy, where even small bits of ammunition, like rifle cartridges, might be recovered by divers. The official narrative always played down their significance, arguing that they were harmless or, if according to law, legitimate. The drone footage, however, silently captured rows of sealed crates on a very different story, one harder to shrug off. The truth is a haunting revelation for the families of the victims. If the Lusitania's cargo helped ignite the explosion that doomed the ship, the disaster becomes not only one of wartime losses, but also one of calculated risk. Thousands of lives may have been sacrificed to push political narratives, to incite outrage against Germany and bring America closer to entering the war. This slaying of the Lusitania, seen through this lens, is not just another maritime disaster, but a deliberately contrived move on a global playing field. But beyond politics, the wreck holds human stories too, reminders that every artifact belonged to someone who never came home. Ghosts in the cabins. While the cargo holds whispered politics and wartime secrets, the cabins of the Lusitania spoke of something more intimate and haunting: the human lives that ended here. As the drone pushed deeper through narrow corridors, its lights revealed the remnants of luxury and ordinary life alike. These were not vast storage areas or mechanical spaces, but rooms where families had unpacked their belongings, where children had played, and where passengers had spent their final hours unaware of the fate rushing toward them. The Lusitania had once been a floating palace. First-class suites rivaled fine hotels in New York and London, adorned with polished wood paneling, plush upholstery, and gilded accents. Even in second and third class, cabins were comfortable, offering a glimpse of hope and upward mobility for immigrants chasing new lives. Now, more than a century later, those same rooms are silent, cloaked in silt and decay. The drone's camera captured fragments that survived: brass bed frames glinting faintly, shattered mirrors clinging to walls, and collapsed wardrobes half buried in sediment. Each fragment reminded viewers of the opulence once promised and the terror that followed. Among other equally ominous moments, one truly stands out: when the drone lights illuminated personal belongings. In one room, a child's toy horse, colored diabolically in red, remained upright in the black silt, with the wood preserved for years in the cold and lack of oxygen. Nearby lay a little leather suitcase, nothing wrong with it, and still strapped shut, just like a testimony to a journey never taken. In another room, clothing appeared to cling to exhibits, with faded materials suggesting a jacket, dress, and sleeve. The photographs spoke volumes about the stories and lives from which they came, a violent rupture into an existence suspended. The cabins felt like they had an unsettling weight, because they seemed frozen in time. The soft, persistent hum of the drone contributed to an atmosphere of intrusion, as if the ship resented the disturbance. Operators of the live feed spoke instinctively in whispers, describing a weightiness, a presence that made any loud voice be considered disrespectful. In some areas, it looked as though the silt had taken some shape, an outline that suggested the curve of a body or the drape of fabric, ghostly traces left behind by some passengers who once inhabited these very spaces. The experts don't dare call them human remains, yet the image sent a chill right through the hearts of everyone who watched it. The Lusitania was not like the Titanic, which went under slowly enough for some passengers to chronicle their escape. It was gone in 18 minutes. Families could not gather their things, and there was no time to prepare. The cabins were soaked with that urgency. Luggage lay unopened. Little keepsakes were scattered about, as if hurriedly dropped. Under the faint beams from the drone, those rooms still felt less like wreckage and more like monuments to untold stories. And just when viewers thought it couldn't get more unsettling, the drone reached the engine rooms, where fire, steel, and terror converged. The heart of the machine. Beneath the staterooms and grand dining halls lay the true powerhouse of the Lusitania, her massive engines, the machines that once drove her across the Atlantic at speeds that astonished the world. The drone's descent into these lower sections revealed a very different kind of silence, the silence of industry, now frozen in collapse. Where once boilers hissed and pistons thundered, there is only rust, jagged steel, and shadows. For a ship designed to embody both luxury and power, her remains now resemble a battlefield of metal. The Lusitania had been celebrated for her engineering might. With 4 gigantic turbines fed by 25 boilers, she could sustain an average speed of over 24 knots, making her not just a luxury liner, but a weapon of pride in Britain's maritime arsenal. At the time of her launch in 1906, she was the largest and fastest ship in the world, a floating display of technological superiority. Passengers walked the decks above, marveling at the smooth ride, never thinking about the titanic forces churning far below. Now, as the drone glided through broken machinery, those same forces felt ghostly, stripped of sound, but not of power. Torpedo impact near the engineering spaces, drone footage showed scarred areas, large dints of ductile metals inwardly bent like twisted ribbons. Boiler casings lie cracked open, inside empty and dark voids. Pipes kinked. Growing marks on the floor are snapping, as if by some invisible hand. Interpretation by forensic marine archaeologists studying the footage showed how concentratedly destruction seemed possible, suggesting the torpedo created havoc rather than just the rupture of one compartment. Probably, such chaos below increased the ship's death spiral and flooded key sections almost instantly. Even in decay, there was a significance to the symmetry of the engines. The lights of the drone washed across the giant shafts, now adorned with rusticles, those fragile icicle-like growths formed with the help of bacteria feeding on iron. After more than a century submerged in water, the anatomy of the engineering wonder appeared to be all but skeletal to the onlooker. One operator stated it resembled walking through the skeleton of a giant beast, its organs destroyed, but its frame stubbornly clinging to identity. These also picture crumbled thoroughfares and control stations, haunting memories of men who had toiled within these depths, members of crews whose names are seldom mentioned, men working in furnace-like temperatures, whose caring made smooth the sail of Lusitania. Many of them lost their chance when the torpedo struck. While trapped in the ship's bowels, They became victims of torrential flooding and fire in their last moments, which were brutal yet swift. The drone's view of destroyed gauges and broken levers made it seem like silent memorials to their sacrifice. The vivid outward-inward expression of the engine room damage was a feature that stood out. Again, the experts debated whether this did not point toward a secondary explosion. If there were any volatile cargo hidden in the near vicinity of these machinery spaces, its explosion might well have accounted for the extent of damage. The engines themselves, once representatives of precision and control, now testify in a supposed crime yet to be solved. For modern viewers, the engine rooms bear a different burden than the cabins. Where the cabins aroused grief for lives that were lost, the engine rooms raise awe at human ambition and the hollowness of even the most sturdy design. And the very heart of Lusitania was thought to be a most powerful creation meant to rule the Atlantic, but turned rather weak against one single torpedo and maybe something more that lay hidden in her own belly. Yet the wreck is not just a site of engineering and tragedy. It is also a battlefield where nations still clash over the truth. War grave or crime scene? The deeper the drone journeyed, the clearer it became that the Lusitania is more than just a wreck. She is both a graveyard and a riddle, resting uneasily in the Atlantic, her shattered hull carrying the memories of nearly 1,200 people. Yet, for over a century, debates have swirled. Is the Lusitania simply a war grave that demands silence and respect? Or is she evidence in an unresolved case of wartime deception and reckless sacrifice? The wreck's legal status has always been unusual. Technically, the Lusitania is not just an artifact of war, it is private property. In the 1960s, a wealthy American businessman named Greg Bemis acquired salvage rights. For decades, he fought governments and conservation groups for access, insisting he wanted to solve the ship's mysteries, particularly the second explosion. Opponents accused him of exploiting a tragedy for profit, while he countered that transparency was the only way to honor the dead. The drone footage, obtained under carefully negotiated agreements, is the latest chapter in this tug-of-war. At the heart of the controversy lies the question of contraband cargo. Should the Lusitania indeed have been carrying munitions, the German assault, however brutal, would have been lawful under the laws of warfare. This revelation of the cargo would shift blame away from Germany and onto Britain, which may have endangered civilian lives by loading undercover weapons aboard a passenger liner. Seen in this light, the Lusitania is more than a maritime disaster. She is a smoking gun for a geopolitical gamble that changed the course of history. That place is a graveyard, really, not with only a few remains, but with hundreds, including men, women, and children, entombed within that shipwreck. The Lusitania is not a puzzle to be dissected by meandering descendants. It's a grave site, an undisturbed resting place. To them, every drone expedition threatens the hallowed memory of their ancestors. These haunting images of individual belongings, shoes, little toys, jewelry, underscore this sacredness. They're not even museum pieces. They are pure pieces of lives cut short. The ethical dilemma is not limited to Lusitania. It becomes almost generic to places like the Titanic, USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor, or many others, where that tragedy meets history. The Lusitania has one fundamental difference from these. The entire sinking still carries that sense of mystery and political power. To some, this is solving history's robes. To others, desecrating a grave. Governments have usually looked at things from a cautious perspective. The British government, for instance, has been heavily criticized for either withholding or destroying documentation relevant to the final voyage of the Lusitania. Apparently, the secrecy itself only fuels the suspicion that more is being concealed. Every moment, the drone sends back another image with rusted iron, buckled steel, sealed crates, bringing pressures back to life on the case. Was the Lusitania merely an innocent victim, or was she in fact placed in harm's way to instigate public outrage and lure the United States into the war? Respect and revelation collide every time an expedition is planned. Marine archaeologists find themselves walking a thin line between desire and due diligence. Just the question of whether to make public the images from inside the Lusitania was the source of fiery debate. Should the public witness those ghostly images from cabins where life came to an end? Or should those areas remain hidden away, swallowed by the sea? And as the arguments rage on land, under the sea, the wreck itself is racing against time, crumbling year by year. Racing against decay. Every wreck tells a story, but no wreck lasts forever. The Lusitania has been lying off the Irish coast for more than a century, and though she rests at a relatively shallow depth compared to other famous shipwrecks, time is slowly erasing her. The drone's latest footage revealed not only haunting artifacts and unsettling mysteries, but also a ship in the process of vanishing. What was once a marvel of steel and engineering is now a fragile skeleton, collapsing inch by inch under the relentless assault of the sea. Marine archaeologists reviewing the scans spoke of accelerated deterioration. Saltwater corrodes the iron plates relentlessly, while colonies of bacteria feed on the wreck's metal, forming strange icicle-like rusticles that grow and crumble in endless cycles. The drone captured areas where decks have caved in entirely since previous dives, creating new voids where cabins once stood. In some places, entire walls have disintegrated, exposing spaces that had never been seen before. The wreck is both revealing and destroying itself at the same time. Currents and storms do their share as well. To her starboard side stands the Lusitania, subject to the sand fluxing and violent Atlantic weather. Each passing decade sinks more of her structure into the seabed. The drone-equipped mapping equipment that produces high-resolution 3D models of the wreck has been able to document the rate at which the outline of the ship has changed in the last 20 years. Bulkheads that had once been strong are now barely hanging on. Decorative railings recognized from earlier footage have reached the stage of collapsing into inconsequential heaps. The decay is not a linear process, it's accelerating. How long do you think the Lusitania can be before it becomes beyond recognition? Some experts warn that in the next few decades, it might be little more than a flattened debris field, its once majestic shape erased. Others allude that the only way to preserve her story for future generations is by documenting her thoroughly now. The drone's 3D scans will allow researchers to virtually walk her corridors long after the real steel has corroded to dust. But preservation can be viewed as not just a technical challenge. It is one that is more ethical and political. Should one work to stabilize the wreck for the purpose of slowing down her collapse, or should Mother Nature be allowed to provide the final rites? Proposals have included everything from protective doming of fragile sections to chemical enhancements that might delay bacterial corrosion. Each of these comes with its own risk and numerous objections. It's hard to reconcile preserving the ship with disturbing her, as many victim families argue, in availing Mother Nature to simply let be. Unresolved secrets are another problem. Decaying with the Lusitania are the chances of ever proving what caused the second explosion. Should the sealed crates deep within her cargo holds contain munitions, Access to them may soon become practically impossible or even completely destroyed. For historians, it is a race against time and silence. Each corroded plate, every corridor that has collapsed, is a piece of evidence that has perished forever. The drone's mission is equally forensic as well as it is purely historical. The drone's footage from inside the Lusitania is more than eerie imagery. It's a chilling reminder of war, deception, and lives lost too soon. What we've seen proves that even after 110 years, her secrets are far from settled. Was she just a passenger liner or something more dangerous? Tell us what you believe in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch the next video on your screen for more untold stories waiting beneath the surface.